Hello again, I'm Axel Wilkinson, back with another tutorial for FXhome's HitFilm 2. In this tutorial, we are going to focus on enhancing practical lighting with HitFilm effects. Here's the shot we're going to create. We'll use the light rays generator to create an effect in a box. Then we will enhance our candle as well. A key component to this shot is setting up practical lights as the basis for the effect while we're filming. So we'll start by looking at how I filmed this scene. Okay, so here is the original shot, straight out of camera. And as I drag through this, you can see that there is a light source inside the box. This is a key point. We need to see the light source in order for the light rays effect that we're going to use to work. It just finds the brightest areas of the frame and creates rays that stretch out from that point. So I'm using a small flashlight and a headlamp inside this box, and then both the bottom of the box and the lid are lined with aluminum foil to make it more reflective. Then I set the camera up high enough that I could just see inside the box so that I could see that light that's in there. Having the lights inside the box is also important because they create this practical light that's being cast onto my face. So you can see that light moving across the front of me. That's coming from the lights inside the box. When the shot is done, that will appear to be coming from the effects that we create. So this brings up another point, which is the lighting ratio in the scene. We need the ambient lighting to be significantly dimmer than the light in the box to keep this light more dramatic and to make it obvious as it illuminates me. So the flashlight that I was using in here isn't super bright. That meant that I needed to keep the room itself pretty dim to get this shot. I actually filmed this in my living room in the middle of the afternoon. I just closed all the curtains, which gave me a dimly lit scene and created enough contrast with the lights that I had inside the box. The candle is just there to add a sense of adventure. So let's get into creating the effects. We're actually going to start by grading our footage because all of these effects we're creating are interacting with the brightness of our footage. So by grading it first, we get a better sense of how they will interact and what the final effects will look like. So I'm going to start with a crush blacks and whites effect. I'll add that to my footage, double click it to open the controls. I'm going to crush the blacks to 0.09 and crush the whites to 0.96. And that immediately, you can see, gives a much more dramatic effect to the footage. The background is much darker, makes it more mysterious. And then I added a white balance effect. I'll drag that on, and I'm just going to sample from this dust that's piled up on the books here. And so I'll just grab the eyedropper and drag it onto that dust. Now we can create the light rays. To do that, let's create a new grade layer. Find a frame where the light is visible in the box. We're actually already on one there. So there's our light source. And then we will just find the light rays effect, and we'll drag that onto our grade layer. Now take this center point and drag it onto your light source. And you can see how if the camera wasn't moving, we could have this scene finished very quickly. But since we have a moving camera, we need to track this shot to keep our center point in place. If you scrub through, when the box is closed there, we can't see the light source, so we can't actually track the light source itself. So we need to find a different point to track. This pile of dust gives me some nice contrasty edges, and it moves exactly the same as the box, and it is always visible, so I'm going to use that to track. So on my magic box layer, I'll create a new track. Now that opens that layer up in the layer panel, so our effects are not visible. And I'm just going to zoom in with my mouse wheel, use the right mouse button to pan down, and then position this tracker on the end of this dust pile. Okay, now from there I will track forward. You can see that the tracker doesn't have much difficulty following that feature of the footage. Now it's made it to the end. So I'll just scoot back to right about where I started and then track the other way to finish tracking that movement. Incidentally, the dust in this scene is actually just flour that I dusted over my little set with a flour sifter. Now that's probably about as far as we need to track, but I'm just going to go ahead and let it finish right to the end of the footage since it's going pretty quickly anyway. Okay, so there's our tracking finished. Now let's go back to where we can see our light source, and we'll just grab the center of the tracking point and drag that right up onto the light. And now if we scrub through that, You can see how that basically stays put on our light source there. Now let's create a new point that we can apply this tracking data to. We'll rename this one to ray point and select our tracker, and we'll choose that as our layer. We'll transform the ray point layer and apply our tracking. Okay, now we can go back to the viewer, and now let's select our light rays effect. Double click that to open its controls, and in the position for the light rays we will use the ray point and then zero out the center controls for the effect. Now you can see that that effect is coming right from our light source, and it tracks nicely with the footage. As you can see though, the rays are kind of going every which way rather than chiefly coming out the front of the box, which is what I would like. So we can adjust that by offsetting the center position. So we just set it back to exactly the location of the point, but if we just shift it this way toward the back of the box a little bit, you can see how that alters the shape of the rays. So if I just go right back in there, I'm going to bring it down a little bit, and then just kind of tuck it into the back of the box until the rays line up with the edge of the lid there. So that's looking much better. And the really cool thing about this effect is that it does so much automatically. With the light rays, if you play through the, or just scrub through the clip, you can see how anytime the box is open at all, we get those light rays popping out. Okay, let's dial in the intensity and the appearance of those light rays now. Find a frame where they're at their brightest, which I think is right about in there, because we want to make sure that as we adjust the intensity, things don't get too bright elsewhere in the footage. So here, let's increase the radius to 50. That makes the rays a bit longer. And raise the intensity to 2.0. And you can see how that gives a bit more body to those light rays coming out of there. But it is blowing out my face a little bit as it brightens that up. You might be happy enough with that the way it looks, but if you want to soften that up, then we can just change the blend mode of the light rays to screen for a bit of a softer effect. I prefer the way that looks. So now things are looking good inside the box, but we do have some issues. There are rays coming out the back of the box. You can see the reflection of the candle glow here has rays coming off of it. Those shouldn't be there. And if we scrub back here, when I blow the dust off, there's a bit of a ray effect happening in the dust cloud there as well. So first of all, for these flares that happen before the box actually opens, oh, see that flare that happens there in my hand? We don't want that. We can eliminate them by just finding the point where the box first opens, where the rays should appear. Back up a bit. Let's rename this layer to light rays so we can keep track easily of what it is. And we'll just trim the front of that right to that starting point. Now obviously we won't have any light rays prior to the point when the box opens. So that's an easy fix. Now we can advance to where the rays start appearing behind the box where they shouldn't be. I think I'm actually going to shift. By shifting that center point back just a little bit more, I can get rid of a lot of those. But here we start getting rays off of that candle glow. So we'll just move back to before those start, and then we can use a mask to eliminate those. But first, select the grade layer, and let's change its scale in the transform properties to 200%. We'll come back to why we did that in just a minute. But now, select the freehand mask tool, and we will draw a mask to remove just kind of a triangular shape from the back of the box there. Okay, now double click the mask to open its controls. We'll invert that so that we're removing the area inside the mask, and then increase the feather strength to around 20 so that as these rays do come into contact with the edge of the mask, they fade out softly instead of just getting cut off in a hard line. Okay, now we need this mask to track with the box. And this is why we changed the scale of the layer. We're going to take our grade layer and we'll just parent it to the ray point. And now you can see how that mask just nicely moves with the box. Now the way this is working is that the entire grade layer is moving. And that's why we increased the scale, so that we have extra space outside of our frame. And as the grade layer moves, the edges of that layer don't become visible in the frame. Okay, I'll scale that back up to fit. So there, by using the tracking data we already had, we very quickly tracked that mask, and it saved us having to animate the mask position manually. And if we play back through our footage now, we can see that our awesome rays effect is doing its thing quite nicely, but the candle is still a little bit lackluster, so we're going to focus on the candle next and see what we can do to enhance the practical candle that was there on set. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is create another track on our footage, since the candle is moving around in the frame. And so even though the flame is what I need to track, I'm going to track the top of the candle itself, and then just offset the position once again into the flame, because the flame is dancing about and changing shape, and the candle will give us a more solid point to track. So, on our magic box layer, we're going to create a new tracker. So first, let's rename our first tracker to Rays. Then we'll add a new tracker. Let's rename this one to Candle. And we can position that down here. I'm going to just select the top of the candle there, increase the search area a bit so it can find it. And we're right here at the end of the footage, so I'll just start tracking backwards. So when I was filming this scene, the light isn't actually coming from the candle to illuminate the scene. The candle's just not bright enough. But in the final shot, it will appear to the audience that the candle is what's providing the light so that we can see what's going on. And then the effects we'll add here will just enhance that practical candle. So the candle is meant to add a sense of adventure and mystery and excitement to the footage. So that's what we want to try enhance with our effects. Okay, here we've lost our track because this dust cloud is obscuring the candle. But I know that that only lasts for a few frames. And so I'm just going to reposition this manually and work my way through a frame at a time. Because we're just applying a soft glow to this candle, the track doesn't actually have to be all that precise in this case. And it looks like it's grabbed it there again, so I'll just resume the auto tracking and let that follow the candle through the scene. Okay, so now that track is finished, and we can create a new point. We'll rename this one to Candle Point. Then select our candle tracker, and we'll assign the transform data to that candle point layer. All right, that's good. So now we can move on to creating the actual glow. We'll start with a plane, make sure it's black, and we'll name this plane Candle Glow. Create that. We'll switch back to the viewer, and we still can't see anything because that black plane is in the way. But if we open the layer properties for that plane and change its blend mode to add, then that black becomes transparent, but any effects that we add to it will still be visible. So now we need to find a light flares effect, and we'll just drag that onto our candle glow plane. And then in the controls for that, choose the chromatic halo preset. Has kind of a nice candle yellow color to it. Open the other elements controls and the rays controls, and in both of those, bring the brightness down to 0 so that we just get that soft glowing effect. We're going to use our candle point that has our tracking data applied to it to control the movement of this glow. So in the hotspot position, we will use layer, candle point, and then 0 out the center. And now we can see I forgot a step in the tracking. I wanted to offset the center point of my tracker to the flame, and I forgot to do that. But that's okay. We can adjust that quickly. We'll go back into our candle tracker. I'll select that, just drag the center point up onto the flame, and then click Apply. Now when we go back to our viewer, that glow is centered up on the flame now. Let's make this a little bit more orange by shifting the color of the hotspot to, well, orange. So in the hotspot controls, we'll just open that color and we'll select a bit more of a yellow-orange color there. That's definitely oranger. Now let's increase the scale of the hotspot to about 1.5. That is a bit bright for a candle. So let's reduce the brightness to 0.3. Okay, so that's feeling a bit more natural. As you scrub through the footage, you can see that that follows the candle around nicely. But candles should flicker, right? The practical flame on the candle is flickering, so we need our flare to flicker as well. Conveniently, we have a flicker effect in HitFilm, which will handle this nicely. So, grab your flicker effect, drag it onto the candle glow plane, and we can dial it in. I'll close the light flares, open the flicker controls, and if you just play through it, you might be happy with that flicker the way it is. I wanted to slow it down a bit, so I set the frequency to 4.6. But you can adjust that to taste. The brightness, changes the maximum intensity of the flicker. So the default setting is 1, which means the flicker will never make this effect brighter than the actual light flare settings we dialed in. So it's going to create the flicker right now by just dimming this layer down periodically. I want it to go a little bit brighter sometimes as well, so I increased the brightness to 1.15. And that pretty much finishes it up. Now you can go back. We'll go ahead and play through to see how our final scene looks. Hopefully you can see how the effects we've created are integrating with the practical lights that were used on set to create the final look. By using the candle, which gives us a nice realistic type illumination, as well as the more magical, more extreme effect inside the box, I was hoping to show several different ways in which practical lighting on set can be used along with post-production effects to create a great shot. So, thanks very much for watching. Let us know if you have any questions or if I need to clarify anything further, and please subscribe to our channel for more HitFilm tutorials and news.